You are listening to the Intelligent Vocalist Podcast, episode 155.
Welcome to the Intelligent Vocalist with John Henny. This is the podcast dedicated to help you be a smarter, better, more informed singer. And now, your host for the Intelligent Vocalist, John Henny.
Hey there, this is John Henny. Welcome back to another episode of The Intelligent Vocalist. I do so appreciate you spending your precious listening time with me. I got to tell you, I was just looking at the numbers of downloads for the podcast, and the last month was just mind-blowing how much the podcast has grown. In fact, if I go back a year, and a year ago, I was happy with the growth. It has tripled in the last 12 months. It's just had an amazing explosion of listeners. So thank you to all of you who spread the word about the podcast, share it with your singing friends, post about it on social media. Those of you who have left reviews, I do truly appreciate it. It really helps people find the podcast. This is just a labor of love for me, if you would like. I get reports of people who are discovering the podcast and binge listening. And while I cannot wrap my head around somebody binge listening to me for hours on end, I really do appreciate it. It's very humbling, and I am very grateful that you find my viewpoints on singing interesting. All right, today I want to talk about the acoustics of belting. You know, belting really is a high wire act for singers, and great belters just skate right on the cliff's edge of impending vocal disaster, whether overstressing the voice or cracking, missing the note. All kinds of things can happen when a singer is belting. And I'm sure you have heard more than one singer go for a big belted note, and it doesn't quite go as planned. And belting, well, singing in general, but belting in particular has this balance of muscle where you've got to employ a little more intensity of muscle, that you're employing a little more of the muscles within the vocal folds. These are called the thyroid muscles. You'll often see them abbreviated as TA muscles, and they are part of the vocal folds themselves. And when you tense them, they make the folds fatter and plumper. And when a singer is belting, they're kicking in a little more of that TA muscle to fatten up the cords a bit so that you get more contact. You're also holding back more air so that when the sound wave comes out, it's a more robust sound wave. But then the kicker is the resonance, is the relationship of the sound wave to the acoustic space within your vocal tract. And the vocal tract is essentially from your vocal folds. So if you feel that bump that goes up and down when you swallow, that's your larynx. And if you just kind of move from the larger notch on the top, it sticks out as an Adam's apple in a man. Just move down a little bit to where you feel that structure kind of just meld into your neck, and it just slopes away. Your vocal cords are sitting right about there at the bottom of this structure. And everything above your vocal folds, up your throat, past the back of your tongue, through your mouth, past your lips, that is our trumpet. That is our instrument. Once we've made the sound wave, if we've made a good sound wave, now it is so vitally important that we filter this sound wave, that we shape our vocal tract in such a way that this sound wave will bounce around inside it in an optimal way. And we're going to use our vocal tract for belting differently than if we are singing in a smoother style or a more classical female style, if you will. When we want to warm up the voice, And female classical singing has that wonderful fluty quality, almost haunting, hollow quality. And that is achieved by pulling down the high frequencies in the sound. But when we're belting, we want to boost these high frequencies. And the resonators are going to take different shapes. And they're called, I get this from Professor Ken Bozeman. He calls it the convergent and divergent resonators. So when something is converging, that means it's coming together. So if you imagine, I have a pyramid. So as you move up the pyramid, the two lines are coming together. They're meeting. And that is more the resonator shape of female classical singing, or if you want to kind of warm up the voice, if you don't want this intensity, the throat, the bottom of the pyramid is going to be more open. It's going to feel more, if you pant like a great big dog or surprise, you'll feel the back of your tongue drop, this larynx will drop, the throat will feel more open. And then the lips, the top of the pyramid, they're more rounded, it's more closed. So the resonator has more of this convergent shape. But when we are going to belt, we are going to reverse that. This is going to be like an upside down pyramid where the point is on the bottom. And then the lines are moving away from each other as you go up the pyramid. It's divergent. They're going in diverse ways, moving away from each other. And that is more of a closed throat and then an open mouth. Now, this tends to get a bad rap because when people are singing badly, particularly when they are shouting and hurting their voice, they are in this divergent resonator setup, but the throat is overclosed and the lips and mouth are over wide. So what we want to do, and this is where I talk about just skating right on the cliff's edge, is we want to move towards this divergent resonator. We are going to have the throat begin to close up a little bit, and we are going to open the mouth more. Now, why would we want to close the throat a bit? Everybody talks about singing on an open throat. That's the ideal. Well, think about a cheerleader's megaphone, which is a divergent resonator. Unless you're singing in the other end, the big end, or you're shouting through it, then you have a convergent resonator. It's coming towards the smaller point. But we're using it properly. So we have the little or the cheerleader cone, yeah? And so we have the smaller opening where we put our mouth. Now, if this opening is too big, you're not going to get that initial burst of energy that we need for belting. So if we make the opening a little smaller, you will now start, the voice will begin to get louder. And that is because the initial energy of the sound wave as it enters this resonator, if the opening is too wide, the sound wave has to travel a greater distance before it reflects off of a surface to then move across and then be reflected off another surface and picking up that acoustic energy. If we make the distance shorter, then it's bouncing off. It has less distance to travel. And so it can pick up that energy more efficiently, and it can bounce off more efficiently. So we have that initial boost of energy. And in the throat, when you're belting, your larynx is likely going to come up a little bit. A lot of times people hear that they need to sing on a low larynx, and they keep trying to get their larynx down and their larynx down. But if you do that, you're not going to get that initial burst of energy. And then we also want to open the mouth. We're going to drop the jaw. The lips are going to pull back a little bit. The tongue may even move a little bit forward. And what we're doing as we create this divergent resonator is we are playing with resonances within the vocal tract as well. Now, when people want to get a really, really bright belt, they can even begin to get that what they call twang or pharyngeal sound, and people will start to find it by quacking like a duck, that quack, quack. And then if you talk that way, it'll start to sound in that almost like a witch's cackle, but it'll get that brighter sound. And you want to watch how much you use that. It just depends on the style. Broadway may use it a little bit more depending on the work that you are performing. It's just you want to. It can very quickly be too much, but you add a little bit of that twang as well, and you're going to get that really intense bright sound. Again, that twang is going to make that opening above the vocal cords even a little more closed for that burst of energy. Now, talking about playing with the resonances, you have multiple boosts of resonances within the vocal tract. And by that, I mean when the sound wave goes in, the sound wave has all kinds of pitches contained within it. And we hear the lower ones as the pitch itself, and then the higher ones as color and even noise. Just kind of that buzziness. And we need all of those in belt. In classical female singing, they're removing the higher ones that kind of create the buzz, the noise, the brightness, because that's not part of the style. But we want the buzz and the noise. So as we play with the resonances in the vocal tract, we are able to bring out different parts of the sound wave. And the lower boost, this first boost that we get, is a little more associated with the throat itself. And this boost needs to have a certain relationship with the sound wave. And what we want to do is we want to move this boost of resonance up to a higher part of the sound wave. Now, this is where it gets tricky with the science and people start talking about formants and harmonics. But just know that we're going to, just like with a little EQ within our body, and I've been reminded that younger people don't know what EQ is. EQ is something we used to have, like when you'd have a blaster and you'd put your tape in it, and there would be those little what were they? Sliders on the front, and you could boost more of the bass or the mids or the highs. And you can do this within the voice. This is how we get vowels and colors. You're constantly changing the interaction of the resonances with the sound wave. But what we're going to do is this lower boost, the one associated with the throat. This is the critical one. This is the one that causes us so many problems. And what female classical singers are doing is they're taking this lower boost and they're moving it down the sound wave. They're boosting a lower part of the sound wave, whereas belters are boosting a slightly higher part of the sound wave. And you can experiment with this in your own voice. If you just take a really deep breath, almost like you're going to yawn, you'll feel your voice just gets that kind of almost dopey sound. It doesn't have a lot of presence or highs in it. If I start to raise my larynx, all of a sudden these high frequencies are coming out, but I've been speaking on the same pitch the whole time. I'm just changing what's being boosted. So in belt, we are going to start to move this lower boost up. Now, we are going to move it up towards a part of the sound wave that is associated with shouting. And if we move this up too high, then we may likely start shouting. And this shout configuration is really tricky because it tells the nervous system to start jamming up. It's prefigured in our nervous system, and shouting's really easy. I've said it before. It's a survival mechanism. It gives us a lot of sensation and feedback. When we shout, we know we're shouting. But when we belt properly, we're not going to have as much sensation as we do in shouting, because you can't shout for a very long time. It's very taxing on the voice. So it's not a good strategy, and you can't go that high with it either. However, we're going to walk it up pretty close. And there are singers who can actually go into the shout condition, but they're able to override the nervous system wanting to tense up. It's a pretty dangerous place. I don't recommend singers do it until they've really got their voice under control. And even then, you be careful with how you utilize it, because it's potentially tiring on the voice, even if you're doing it rather well. It's hard to sing there all the time, and it can become a bit strident if it's overused. It's a bit of, well, it's kind of a yelly sound. But singers that are able to move in and out of it, oh man, it's a great effect to hit something that's really kind of out the mouth. Some teachers call it splatty, yelly, but you do it in a controlled way, and then you can go back into this belted mix. And that, to me, is the ideal, to be able to move in between them when you are belting. But this belted mix, you're going to move this lower resonance just below that shouting condition. Now, for those of you that are more into the science, you're going to move the lower resonance towards the second harmonic. You're going to float between the first and second harmonic. And these are just simply parts of the sound wave. The sound wave, these multiple pitches are called harmonics, and the voice has a bunch of them. But this area between the first and second, so critical, because the more you move to that first or the lower part of the sound wave, the more you go to that kind of classical sound, that warmer sound, the more you move it to the second one, which is the shouty one, the more intensity you get, the more brightness you get. So at first, you may need to hang out more towards that lower energy of the sound wave, especially if you're feeling strain, if it's locking up. You're going to have to stay there, and being a little more in that convergent resonator, just feeling yourself and having an open throat and doing kind of closed ooh vowels and letting it feel rather light and heady is a good way to start exploring your upper register before you start skating on the cliff's edge. But to belt, you're going to have to start walking towards, and the larynx is going to come up a little bit. You may feel a little more of that at the throat. Not a squeezing, but we're just going to get that throat closed a little more. The vowel's going to start to open up, and we're going to start to creep towards that shout condition. And this is where you're going to spend a lot of your time working on your voice, a lot of your practice time. And in a typical practice session, you'll want to be a little more as you warm up in the convergent resonator, and just those lighter sounds. And then you begin to open things up, and you start to go a little more divergent. And then you start to engage a little more of that TA muscle and press in. And then you can really start getting into the belting work. Now, there may be days where your voice just isn't up to that, and you're going to stay in those more closed, those warmer sounds. That's fine. Don't push this. Don't rush this. This is not something you want to make a lot of mistakes on. And if you do make a mistake, let the voice crack rather than yell. It's better to flip, because the yelling is just so hard on your voice, and it's working in coordinations, and it's activating muscles you don't want to activate. So take it easy and be patient. But just know that as you belt, your resonance strategy is going to change. It's going to get more intense, it's going to get more open, and then it's just learning to ride just below that shout, or even touching it in a controlled way, and then back into that really strong mix belt. Hey, if you want to know more about me, please visit my website, johnhenny.com. And if you want to get more into belting, I do have my course, Boldly Belting. Just go to boldlybelting.com. And This course will take you through all the levels, walk you into really intense belt. And what I've done is I've created these little short songs that use specific sounds so that you'll be able to work in melody and language, not just exercises and then trying to jump to a song, but I've created this in-between step of these little mini songs I call lyricizes that can just easily walk you up the ladder into really intense belts. So you can check that out if you're interested. And until next time, to better singing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.